Welcome back to the Light in the Attic podcast.
I'm Jackie.
And I'm Hillary. This week we're going to talk about Acetone, our newest release.
Acetone are a Los Angeles band from the 90s, and I am a Los Angeles human from the 90s, and I've never heard of Acetone, or I hadn't heard of Acetone until this project. Had you heard of them?
I had heard about their previous band, Spin Out, because I knew of Spin Out from their time on Delicious Vinyl, which was an old hip-hop label that Mike Ross and Matt Dyke started in the late 80s. But I didn't realize that Spin Out kind of became Acetone, even though it's a completely different band, but I didn't realize it was associated at all.
Right. It was the band, it was Acetone plus a different lead singer.
Right.
And then basically once that lead singer, Tom Henry, I think his name was out of the picture, then Acetone sort of did its own thing and realized that they were sort of maybe better off without him.
Yeah, Spin Out was really cool, but they were way more scuzzy, grungy, kind of more...
They were kind of like flamboyant, like...
Yeah, like a party
showy
band.
Yeah.
And Acetone, we're going to try and explain Acetone, but it's really hard to explain. But Acetone's way more complex and subdued.
Yeah, and this was in, Spin Out was in 1991. And so I think it was still like hair metal days in Los Angeles.
Maybe?
I was 1 year old, but that's what Sam Sweet said.
Hair metal. And Sam Sweet, he pretty much is the man to talk about when you talk about kind of music history in that period in LA, because he's a friend of ours who also did the liner notes for our Heart When Highways release, which...
And Greetings from Suicide Bridge, or Songs from Suicide Bridge.
Songs from Suicide Bridge, yeah. Those are both amazing liner notes, but he is like this contemporary LA cultural and geographic historian. And he's so good at aligning locations with the culture that was happening at that time. And
right. And so Sam is the reason why we started working on this project. Sam is good friends with Matt, the Light in the Attic founder, and Sam has been working on a book about Acetone for like 9 years.
Yeah.
And so Sam told Matt about it, and I think like the moment that won Matt over was, I think Sam took Matt for a drive in Highland Park, which for non-Angelinos is like a super hip neighborhood now, but back in the 90s was kind of like no man's land. But Acetone hung out there in the 90s, and so Sam took Matt on a tour of where they used to hang out and told him all about the band and like stories he'd heard from Mark from the band who he'd been interviewing. And they listened to the band's music the whole time at night, and it just like...
That sold it.
Yeah, it blew Matt away. So for the podcast, for this episode about Acetone, it was Matt's idea that we go on a ride-along with Sam as well.
And we brought along Mark from the band, Mark Lightcap.
Yeah, Mark Lightcap, the guitarist and sometimes vocalist, backup vocalist. And yeah, so we met Sam and Mark at La Abeja, this Mexican restaurant in Highland Park.
Super hole in the wall.
It was so great. There was like
Three Stooges.
Yeah, the owner is apparently obsessed with the Three Stooges. So behind the counter, there was just like Three Stooges memorabilia everywhere, and there was like wood paneling, and
you could totally imagine 90s indie
musician dudes,
rock dudes hanging out, eating enchiladas,
along with like families, you know. And apparently the restaurant has been there for 48 years. So we met there, and then we got in Mark's 1984 Volvo station wagon, complete with an 8-track player.
And no AC.
No AC, and it was like a 93-degree day.
Very comfortable.
And he drove us around Highland Park, and told us cool stories, and Sam kind of interviewed Mark, and it was a wild ride. So a little more about the band. Formed in 1992, as we said, sort of out of the ashes of Spin Out. They were formed in the Cal Arts scene. Mark Lightcap, who we mentioned, was at Cal Arts studying tuba, exploring experimental music. And Richie Lee, who was the singer and bassist for the band, was there studying painting. Richie was friends with Steve Hadley, who was a surfer from Newport Beach, where Richie was from. And they ended up, one of them was living in this like little pool house shed basically thing in the back of a house in Highland Park that they drove us past. And that's where they would practice. And they had kind of like a really mellow, sleepy 90s sound.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you're into like Spiritualized or Mazzy Star, they're not quite the same, but I think if you like those bands, you'd be really into Acetone.
Yeah.
And they were as good as, if not better than a lot of these bands, but they never quite hit their stride because the fate of the band was kind of cut short.
When Richie Lee committed suicide in 2001. But before that, the band actually had some success. They toured with Oasis and the Verve and Mazzy Star and wasn't there another one? Spiritualized. Yeah.
They were good buddies with Jason Pierce.
Yeah. They told this funny story about how one year Oasis was opening for them, and the Acetone dudes were like, "Oh my God, what is this like derivative, horrible British pop rock?" And then the next year, Oasis had blown up, and Acetone was opening for Oasis.
The tables had turned.
They were a somewhat famous band in the 90s, but then they just their career was cut short, and they were just kind of weirdly forgotten.
Yeah, a lot of people that they toured with, especially like Hope Sandoval from Mazzy Star, they cite them as being one of their favorite bands. Richard Ashcroft, Hope Sandoval, Jason Pierce, all those people cite them as their favorites.
Yeah, Hope Sandoval, she says, Acetone are one of my all-time favorite bands. Their music is still as electrifying and beautiful now as it was back then.
It's a lot like a lot of the music we put out, where you just hear it and you think, why wasn't this bigger?
Yeah.
It should have been bigger, and it wasn't. And it's a damn shame, but it's really cool that we can bring this back with this anthology that we've put together that's a mix of tracks that have been released, but also a lot of the tracks have not been released before.
Right. 7 of the tracks have never been released, and we think that they're better than the stuff that even has been out before. So this project is comprised of the book that Sam wrote, which is called Hadley Lee Lightcap. It's about a 250-page nonfiction book about Acetone and their relationship with the city of Los Angeles and with each other.
And their place in this really changing landscape that was LA.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then our release is an anthology of the band that is the companion to the book. And it has 7 unreleased tracks. And that's called Acetone 1992 to 2001.
Something really exciting.
Yes.
Is that in November, they're going to play a show. And even though Richie is no longer with us, the remaining members, Mark and Steve, are going to play a live show in LA
as Acetone.
As Acetone with Hope Sandoval of Mazzy Star.
As guest singer. So that's going to be in early November. Venue TBA.
We'll update you on the location when we find out on our Twitter, Facebook, blog, Instagram, etc., etc. But yeah.
Speaking of, rate, review, subscribe?
Yeah, please. We have like 5 ratings on iTunes, and we need more because I think there are more than 5 of you listening. I hope there are.
Are there? Will you tell us?
Please rate, review, and subscribe.
Tell your friends.
Anyways, let's listen to that ride along we did.
Yeah.
Are we ready to roll? All right, we're moving out.
I was telling Hillary about Paramahansa Yogananda's Center for something.
It's a landmark over here.
Self-realization, which is like right near it's like above the Southwest Museum.
Yeah, we could. Well, that's a kind of awesome drive up there, so we could roll up over the.
Let's take this old ass car up the steepest, narrowest roads we can find right off the bat. After all, Mercury is in retrograde, so what can go wrong?
Yeah.
But because we're just leaving La Beja, I thought maybe you could we could introduce La Beja a little. Maybe have you. I never heard the story of what like your earliest memories of La Beja or your entree to La Beja.
Well, I mean, Steve kind of discovered it. He was living in this little guest house up here in Mount Washington on Crane, and he was the first one that took us there. But then I found out that my father-in-law, who lives over here in Montecito Heights, had been eating there since the 70s.
Yeah, they said it's been around for 48 years.
Yeah. So, it's the best carne adobada in town. It'll definitely paraphrase Jonathan Gold. It will make you want to throw rocks at all other adobada.
He called it cowboy food too, famously, I think, which is almost, it does feel like chuck wagon food, sort of.
Totally. All right, here's the Southwest Museum here, which I don't think it's open now. I think
it's open one day a week.
1 day a week.
Yeah, it's been in limbo for a long time though.
But and then there used to be these, like this tunnel here has these really awesome dioramas in there that it used to just be open all the time because that was the corridor that you would walk through to get to the museum, and there were these sort of like moth-eaten, mouse shit, like infested dioramas.
What I was thinking about too, as we were talking about doing this drive, is I believe this month
Boulevard. All right. Well, what the hell? We'll just go up, drive by Steve's old house.
Doesn't this month mark the 32nd anniversary of your arrival in Los Angeles? August 1985?
I'll trust you to answer that question, Sam.
Well, let's pretend it is.
Sam knows more about my life than I do at this point. So
I'm the Robert Caro to your Lyndon B. Johnson.
I've just outsourced my memory to Sam to make room for other thoughts.
I think a lot of people could say that about Sam.
So Carl and Jess used to live in that house there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was during the riots. Okay, so our good friends, the Bronsons. Carl is mentioned. I guess we can talk about this because Carl is a character in the book. My dear friend Carl Bronson was another person that we play music with, but they were living here during the 92. Was it 92? The riots. Mm-hmm. So this is where we ran from our house in Silver Lake, or our apartment in Silver Lake, and hid out here.
I thought you went to Lone Pine.
Well, we came here first because our neighborhood was getting really sketchy, and then we came up here, and this was where the smoke was just so thick you couldn't even breathe. And
this meaning Mount Washington?
Like Mount Washington.
Is that right?
It was just like, this cloud of smoke. You could just see the whole city, just like helicopters flying around, smoke coming up, and just like a black cloud. And that's when we just got in the car and drove up to the Sierras with the clothes on our back.
Desperate for clear air.
Desperate for, I was like, you know what? Well, because that was right when they called in the National Guard, you know, and I figured it was either going to just stop or it was going to turn into a total bloodbath. And either way, just didn't want to be here when it went down, so.
Was there stuff active on the streets around here, or
no,
not so much?
it was mellow here.
Yeah, but in Silver Lake, I know there was stuff. And
Totally. So.
And maybe just to set it up too, as we go through these old things, you're a kid from suburban Philadelphia who comes to California, which is like the equivalent of going to Mars in your background,
right?
As an 18-year-old, to go study tuba in the music program at Cal Arts, which was at that time a respected and known art school, but still very much sort of a how would you describe it? I guess Cal Arts in 1985.
A haven for freaks.
A haven for freaks.
It was known for, famous for nudity at poolside and, rampant drug use and just all manner of...
Famously, it was Walt Disney's dying wish was to build this Caltech of the arts, which would be sort of an interdisciplinary school that would produce future Disney employees. And then he croaked 2 years before it was set to open, and through a series of mishaps, a bunch of completely radical avant-garde artists kind of got a hold of the funds, and by the time the Disney board realized what was going on, they had established like the most radical art school in the country. And then it sort of ran on that energy for quite a long time, including up through the 80s. But one of the things that I'm interested in that the book's about is, there's a famous generation of Cal Arts artists from the 70s who went to New York, but then there's a lesser known generation of characters that came out of the school in the 80s when you were there, and Acetone was one of the exponents of that generation. And not that everyone from that foment became famous, but there were certainly a lot of characters came out of that foment of the school at that time, and a lot of them sort of float through the story of Acetone in LA and Northeast LA. And even now it cracks me up like how many connections there are. Like if we drive around Highland Park, you're just going to be pointing out houses and studios of people you've known since you got to Cal Arts in 1985. And if you kind of know that Cal Arts history, all of a sudden there's like a map that appears over that has a lot to do with this part of LA. And so that's just a setup as we pass Carl and Jessica's house. And so if we're talking about Highland Park as sort of the nucleus of Northeast LA and this place where your band was, part of the settlement, how would you describe this area to someone whose only image of LA is, the Chinese Theater or Santa Monica or something like that?
How would I describe it back then?
How would you describe it back then when you first encountered it?
Yeah, it was just really beat and sleepy, and I think Steve's place is right up here. It was like the back house, maybe to this house. If you just look at this is what it looked like. This weed-choked guardrail to the side.
But meeting this kind of majestic, this like weirdly majestic area of LA that's between the mountains and the city. I always think the kind of the most amazing part of this part of town is just the topography, because it's this weird intertidal zone between the real mountain, like the San Gabriel Mountains, and the city. And it's really built into all these low rolling hills, and there's all these kind of hidden streets and stairwells, and there's still dirt roads up here.
Yeah.
And so it is. I think especially back then, it was probably this mix of just kind of horrendously woebegone meeting like this scruffy urban wilderness paradise.
Yeah, sort of mansions and shanty towns kind of side by side.
Well, I guess there was, in your time, the other thing I kind of like about the Acetone story is that you can sort of trace these changes in LA over that period from sort of the eastward expansion of LA.
Yeah.
Tell us sort of the circuit when you first arrived in LA and then how that sort of shifted out this way.
Yeah, well, it was all in Hollywood. There were no clubs on the east side at all, you know. So it was,
how did people regard this part of town that you would have been hanging out with at that time? As totally off the map?
Well, let me see. I knew our friend Debbie lived in Echo Park, but that was just a place where you did not go. It was, you know, it was like the just most blood-soaked part of the city. Yeah, you just would not, you know. It was just a truly frightening.
Like when you heard the name Echo Park, it was.
You just thought, like, no fucking way.
No
you know,
way.
it's like Williamsburg. Like
a
Williamsburg used to be
six-pack
like that.
there.
You know, like you know, you just wouldn't go there. But you know, Debbie King and Cannon Hudson lived there. You know, in this place that they were paying like $200 a month for or something.
Yeah.
And then yeah, Silver Lake was all like, you know, just working class and old Queens. It was like the old gay neighborhood. But all the shows were in Hollywood. The Strip, you know, all the clubs.
That was still
there.
going.
Yeah. No, that was the heyday of
You
the
came
Strip.
out here to play hair metal, right?
I did, yeah.
And you got here just a minute too late.
One lane road. Wow. All right, let's check this out.
This is classic.
All right, here we go.
Washington, right?
Still got dirt roads here.
I think this is for horses.
Are you taking pictures, Hillary? You getting this?
Yeah.
So this is somebody's house up there. Or does this connect? Does this go through?
Come on, Mark. Just tell him you lived here in the 90s. It's not a
Right.
problem.
That's cool, man.
I was here in 96. But I always think that, I mean, the bottom line is, I always think this is kind of one of the really special areas of LA. And even though you have musicians and bands associated with all these pockets of LA, whether it's the Valley or Laurel Canyon or Watts, I don't think anyone really attaches anything specific to Northeast LA, but when you learn about Acetone, it really is an example of a band whose story and sort of the sound of their music, for me, is really tied into the feel of this part of town. I mean, of LA in general, but particularly Northeast LA, which is sort of this area between the mountains and the city. But you were never thinking of yourselves that way.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, we always thought of this as our kind of, you know, our secret lair, you know. I mean, we were really into living in this place that was just away from the, you know, all the groovy groovers.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think that's kind of one of the things about Acetone, or I guess every band sort of, I always think of every band sort of builds a house that they want to live in, proverbially.
Yeah.
Like they pick the land, and then the sound of the music is sort of the house they build that they want to stay in, and each person in the band sort of helps design and furnish this house. And some bands build houses that a lot of people want to visit and live in, and other bands live houses that literally only they want to go to.
That's us, boy.
And I always pictured Acetone as sort of this, like kind of one of these houses on these hillsides, sort of like that on that dead end street.
Well,
where it's just
you
like,
know, I always, it's like those houses you see that the only thing that's holding them up are the people living inside them, and if the people leave the house, like, it'll just collapse on itself.
I was thinking of Acetone as just like this really decrepit house hanging by a thread, but it gets like the most beautiful light, and it has like this incredible view, but the house itself is just barely standing up.
Yeah, well, I always think of Acetone as a porta potty parked on a job sites.
That too.
Yeah.
But with a really good view.
With a really good view. All right, now we're getting into self-realization.
Now this is like the
We've just like come out into Shangri-La.
Yeah, this is
I think this is
this is
it.
like the Beverly Hills in Northeast LA.
Yeah.
When you drive around here, do you immediately have acetone sense memories, or is it just general memories of all kinds of things from your
Yeah,
life?
no,
during
it's
those
just
periods?
general.
We're
That's
pretty close to the Terrace 49.
Yeah, so we're on Terrace 49 where we used to live. This is the Coptic church of Northeast LA. So if you're lucky, you'll see these dudes walking around on the street who are dead ringers for the Pharisees and Jesus Christ Superstar. Crazy black robes and tall hats. Or maybe you'll just see kids playing basketball.
Yeah. Or the Pharisees playing basketball.
Yo, bro. Is that Esperanza Spalding in that Jeep?
Probably.
I just saw a face in the middle of a beach ball sized afro. Filled up the whole car.
Have you and her talked about doing something?
Yeah, we were just talking this morning. Talking about doing some stuff.
Something for Blue Note, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think Mark, I'm always waiting for Mark to make a solo jazz guitar record, like one of those old Barney Kessel records. Moods of Cubby.
Yeah, right.
Won't do it.
What about just tuba?
Just tuba.
Good name for it, actually.
Yeah, right. That's. I'll get straight to work on it, you guys.
One man, 5.
All right. Here's where we used to live, in this jungle here.
Up in this driveway. This is
my pal Steve Goodfriend's house. Steve Goodfriend, who took over for Steve Hadley as the drummer for Acetone at the very end. I've got 2 of my dogs buried in the backyard there. So
this is sort of where you lived towards the end of Acetone's lifespan, and also where the band practiced up until it dissolved.
yeah, we used to practice in an old pottery studio behind the garage there. So
beautiful little, almost just like a little one-room cabin, and you can't really see it from here, but the way it's situated, when you're in the studio, you can get this little peekaboo view of the mountains. So it feels very. It's got kind of that nice rustic feel that certain parts of Mount Washington have.
Yep, it's a great spot.
And good friend said that the country squire just sat there inert for years, warding off evil spirits. I think good friend actually expressed that he did think it warded off. I don't know if he meant.
Hey, Nietzsche, how's it going? Hey, I've been good, man. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah.
Who's that?
That's Nietzsche, our next door neighbor. Super excellent guy.
What'd you like about playing in that room?
That room had perfect sound. It was basically like a cube. It was all just plywood walls, so it had this, everything just sounded great in there always. That's where we recorded the Dick Slessig.
Your other band besides Acetone.
So that Wichita Lineman was recorded there.
But one of the things I love about Mark's story, and one of the things that's sort of like makes the Acetone story a parable about.
Oh man, that's a really good one. With the track that's a little John Cage moment here.
Put this on tape, we get accepted to CalArts for the fall, right?
Easy as that.
That's all it is.
All it takes.
You slap a title on this baby, and then all of a sudden,
Yep.
I'm into it. What do you love about Mark's story?
Oh,
Did you say it?
well, Dick Schlesig, the two guys he played with in Dick Schlesig combo were his best friends from Cal Arts, and that band predated Acetone. And one of my favorite quotes from Mark is he said when he first played with Dick Schlesig, he thought, these are the guys I want to be playing with when I'm 50. And he didn't end up actually playing with those guys. He did, of course, after Acetone broke up, but so it's sort of like,
Yeah.
like meeting your true love when you're 19, then marrying a totally different woman at 21, then she dies when you're in your 30s, then you go back and like get together with your original true love or something. It just is a funny story about like why you end up playing with the people you do and how you don't always end up playing with the people that you like the most.
All right, so let's see.
That's it. This blue one.
Yep, there it is. Okay, so this is where it all began.
Is this with the pool house?
That's the pool house. That's right back there behind the little blue tarp.
So Steve Hadley rented the little converted garage basically in back.
And it was some like French harpist that lived in this house.
Law student or
And
something.
I don't know what the hell she was doing in Highland Park.
Vivian.
Yeah, she was, you know, I don't know, it was a funny scene.
Do you remember coming over here for the very first time
I don't.
to check it out?
Nope.
And
That was like 1991 or something. Sam.
earlier.
That was like 1975, Sam.
The best quote for you later. Trying to get a date right, Mark's like, I don't know, man. It was the 90s.
The world was changing, man.
The world was changing, man. Recycling was just getting going.
The fucking lamest decade ever.
It was pretty dumb.
Really, you know, to see like 90s retro coming around is like, really? You could pick any decade to fixate on. You're picking that one.
It was such a silly time.
I'd say it wasn't even silly enough. Like the 80s were silly.
How would you describe the 90s?
Boring.
Well, give us something more quippy than that.
Uh,
Jim Putnam told me the 90s were a time when it wasn't cool to be happy. And then someone else said, well, Jim Putnam's never been happy.
I don't know. Jim seems pretty happy now.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Some other mean Cal Arts person said that because that's all you guys do is say mean things about each
that's
other.
true.
The cat in distress.
All right.
So you didn't live over here in the early days. Steve did, and you'd drive over here and hang.
Right. Yeah, we lived in a fourplex over in Silver Lake.
And it was
$650 a month.
And coming over here was really like going to the boonies.
Yeah. No, I mean you literally could not get a cup of coffee that wasn't like
Donut
just
shop
the
coffee.
shittiest donut shop coffee.
And you didn't, when you probably, even at that time, when you would say, oh, we're practicing over at Steve's place in Highland Park, some people would just not even.
They wouldn't even know what
register.
you were talking about. Yeah. But amazingly, let's see. And there was never traffic on the boulevard, right?
Yeah.
Never, ever.
It has gotten trafficy.
It's really crazy.
But, you know, amazing.
But
how
miraculously, the Azteca de Oro liquor store, just where we bought our liquor, is still there, selling liquor.
What was your liquor of choice back then?
Tecate.
Tecate,
And
six
Presidente
Brandy.
brandy. All right, so let's see. The pawn shop is still there, but the guy who used to run the pawn shop was an old like music head who had been here since the 60s. This guy Doug, I forget his last name, and so you could really geek out on music with him.
Did you get some scores there?
No, not really, but it was the only place where you could buy guitar strings for miles. And so he just totally gouged you on guitar strings. And, But he was a cool guy. And pool hall. Zeppelin seems like the old school Highland Park store now, but that opened way later.
What's really funny to me is that you played music here for all those years, named an album York Boulevard when no one knew where it was, and then 25 years later it becomes hip. 3 record stores open up here and none of them carry Acetone. Love it.
I know, and now everyone's going to think we titled the album York Boulevard because it's such a groovy street, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. So so that's where crack dealers live, in that house, so we don't want to linger too long. But they're still there, if you need crack, that's the spot.
Really?
Right next to the car wash.
Noted.
Here's the Kelly studio.
Yeah, so now...
You're never going to make this left turn.
All right, yeah, so here's the former Mike Kelly studio, now turned into another mediocre mid-century furniture store.
When did you work there? What were the
I
years?
worked there from 2005-ish to till 2012.
So basically the last 7, that's where Mike was based the last 7 years of his life. And a few other places around here, I guess. We should
go to Cal Arts.
Let's swing by
that would be...
let's swing by
Can you imagine?
Huarache and get some aguas.
Yeah.
They're open. They got the best over there. But there was this awesome band that plays in this shed here that we would hear when we were working over in the Kelly
Metalheads?
studio. No, they were just like really shitty garage band that I totally loved. Like they were too shitty that they didn't even have a garage. They had a shed. Just
relate to
really,
that.
Really great.
Shed rock.
Yeah.
Where'd you buy tacos back in the Acetone era? Where was the Eats spot?
Let's see.
Because Huaraches wasn't around then.
Yeah, I mean, Rambo's down on
Rambo's on Eagle Rock.
On Eagle Rock is the spot. Although that was maybe a little later. All right.
We'll guard the...
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Right out front.
Yeah, totally.
Pause. We are live again.
Should we pretend that we're seeing that bitchin' lowered samurai again for the first time? Oh man, look at that samurai.
Look at that fucking
Shit.
shining in
Never
the sun.
see those tricked out lowrider
Careful.
style like that. Amazing.
What's your favorite car you've ever owned?
Well, I don't know. Might be this one.
Why? Because
Probably the Country Squire.
in the book
It
I
would
wrote
be-
about
it would be the Country Squire.
extensively about your 1967 Country Squire.
I know. I'm just
sort of
being
becomes an avatar.
contrarian.
But I am curious, because you were so in love with that Country Squire, which was this horrible beast of a car that everyone else was just completely revolted by, and then you loved with all your heart. And then eventually you fell in love with this Volvo. How'd that happen?
Well, I'm a station wagon guy, right, Sam?
All goes back to your parent, borrowing your
gotta have a
parents' car,
station
probably.
wagon, and the Country Squire is the station wagoniest station wagon that ever stationed its wagon in Station Wagon Town. I mean, they're, the fake wood paneling, the whole deal. It's kind of what I grew up with.
Kinda, yeah.
Well,
it's a complete subversion of growing up as like a
I
post-war.
grew up in a '72 Mercury Montego. Didn't have the wood paneling, so this is '67. A little more slender. Cars got tubbier in the '70s. But I don't know. It was just a joy. I loved it. Had these crazy, when we lived up in Mammoth, just like road trip up to Reno with like 7 people in the thing, and it was just like a living room on wheels, just total like rolling
And you've
rolling party.
Part of the Mark Lightcap aesthetic is always to find this intense beauty and affection in something that is going to make other people completely repulsed. That's a theme. It's like find like the most heinous thing and then love it to death.
But that car, that's the car from the Thomas Crown affair.
Right.
So it's you're on the right here, on this side. Or
take a right. Sorry.
In this little
This street, and it's this green building. Go in through the driveway through the yellow poles there.
These are Country Squire colors.
Yeah, right. This is the exact color. Yeah. Well, this is a little more avocado.
This is
the crack dealer, Avenue 53 at Figueroa.
I want the best. Make sure we get the best possible levels. I'm happy to stay here forever. I just want to make sure we're getting the golden tones here.
So there was this article from the Columbia Spectator that I read from 1993, and it was an interview with you guys. It seemed like there was a lot of not wanting to put yourselves in boxes. That was a recurring theme. Not wanting to be categorized or pointed at as being a certain type of music. And people will do that anyways, of course. Do you still feel like that now? Do you feel like you could be categorized as what you're saying, slowcore, sadcore?
I don't think so. I mean, it's really, our second record was really, yeah, I mean, I just, I see how people would, there were certainly tracks that would easily fit into what's thought of as the slowcore model, but it just, I always really just kind of hated all those bands. I mean, we always thought of ourselves like, if you listen to any band, like the Velvets or Led Zeppelin, or I don't know, they had slow songs, they had fast songs, The fast songs got fewer and farther between as time went on, but yeah, I feel like it's just as non-conforming to those kind of norms now as it was then.
How would you describe the Acetone sound to someone who's never heard it before?
Yeah, God, that's hard. I don't know. We're really into this band called Hui Ohana, right? Who are a Hawaiian trio, but really beautiful, like electric guitar playing and harmony singing. And we were kind of obsessed with this record of theirs that we had. And we're sort of consciously trying to combine that with a lot of like thrift store exotica that we were listening to, and then like Curtis Mayfield and J.J. Cale, and Stephen Ritchie were really into Spacemen 3, Velvet Underground, classic rock, and the Everly Brothers, country music, the Beach Boys. So, if you just put all that in a Vitamix and let it sit out in the sun for a while, I guess that's what you would get.
All right, yeah. And just a quick follow-up. One of the other questions in that interview, they asked what bands currently that you guys liked, and the answer was, again, I don't listen to anything right now. He said, I don't listen to any music right now. Nothing is good right now. Nothing. I think it said nothing out there is good. Um, so I was going to ask you, since you're a different person with different opinions, if I were to ask you now, if you were to have a current band open for you on tour, who would you want that band to be?
Well, I would want it, and Mike, if you're listening to this, I would want it to be this guy, Mike Reed, who's an organ player who posts his videos on YouTube. And he's older than I am. He's probably well into his 60s, but he's just a super kick-ass organ player who I have a record of, his weird like lounge record called I Believe in Music from the 70s. But I would say the fact that he has a huge YouTube presence now would qualify him as a new band or a contemporary band, and he's the one who I want to have open for us when we do our show here in LA. You got to check this dude out. You got to check out Mike Reed. There's a video of him doing Caravan that's mind-blowing. He's a monster. So, Mike, if you're listening,
we're coming.
Come to LA. I think he lives in Ohio.
Maybe we can get him. Could one of you guys tell the story of the lamp show versus the light show at the Verve?
Yeah, we did our first tour with the Verve. They were called Verve then, or they were just in the process of having to change their name to the Verve. But they had just no holds barred psychedelic light show, total English style, arena rock, psychedelic, which was super intimidating for us. And we realized we had to do something, and we couldn't compete with them on their level. So we had to just create a level of our own that was just in sharp contrast to them. We rehearsed in a little bedroom, and our music came out of this really kind of intimate environment of thrift store accoutrement. And so we just went with that. We just went to the thrift store and bought some lamps and just went as far in the opposite direction as we could possibly go. And we kept doing that, when we were out on tour with Oasis. Then we came up with the idea, because we always loved a disco ball, and so then we decided we wanted to just have our own disco ball that belonged only to us. So we got the disco ball and the motor and the shitty little disco light, and made this funky armature out of pipe from the Home Depot that we would hang the disco ball over Steve's drum kit, and then we had our disco ball and our lamps every night. Didn't have to ask the lighting guy to turn on the disco ball because we had our own.
How did this whole, Sam's book and the reissue project first enter your life, and what has it been like, and how do you feel about all of this?
Well, let's see. Sam got a hold of Steve, and then Steve kind of reacted to it in a negative way. He was like, there's some guy named Sam Sweet who wants to write a book about acetone. And I was like, that's cool, man. Right on. And so I had his email, and I sent him a message and said if he wanted to talk about acetone, I'd be happy to do it. And it just went from there. That was like 15 years ago.
Whoa.
No, it was 9 though, right? It was 9 years ago. It just went on and on. Sam's had a whole life since that book started. Written other books, had kids, put them through college.
Run for office.
9-year-old disgraced mayor.
And so, and you know, we became friends over the course of it. So it kind of, I'm sure it morphed. I never had a preconceived idea of what it would be. I can't speak for Sam, but I don't know. It's kind of a weirdly therapeutic exercise. Some way of purging the demons of the past by dumping them into Sam's lap and letting him deal with it. You know, I mean, Sam asked, we were having lunch the other day, and he asked me why I let him do this. And the best answer I could come up with was a momentary lapse of judgment. Because I'm really a private person at the end of the day, so it's a strange kind of endeavor. But in the words of Cornelius' brothers and sister Rose, it's too late to turn back now.
Since the band stopped playing, in the years that have passed, what have you been doing?
Well, let's see. Playing music, you know, there's Dick Slessig stuff, which is my other band that exists very sporadically.
Can you tell us a little bit about the name of the band?
Let's see. Dick Slessig. Well, this is a band that we started. I started with my friends Steve, good friend, and Carl Bronson in 1989, 1990. Because I was sick of this band Spin Out that I played in with Richie and Steve and this guy Tom Henry. So Dick Slessig was just another, you know, it was like a relief from that. And it actually started out because I wanted to do covers of songs that were in the soundtrack to Pink Flamingos. Like there's all this great music in the Pink Flamingos soundtrack that is uncredited. You know, there's no credits for the music in there. I found out later that these songs that I wanted to do actually were Link Wray songs.
I have that CD in my car.
The Pink Flamingo soundtrack is on Freely.
Yeah.
So that's how that started out. But then it, you know, kind of morphed and we got into doing these really kind of distended versions of songs that lasted for hours. So there's that, you know, that's sort of an ongoing project. And then did a bunch of stuff with Matmos, who are old friends of ours. So I've played on a bunch of their records and toured with them. Dick Slessig did a tour with Matmos. And I went out playing with Hope Sandoval in her band. And then started working for Mike Kelly and had a kid. So...
And that's that.
But for me, understanding CalArts as the backdrop that kind of created this whole network of musicians, artists who are also friends, who also ended up working in the studios of other artists, who ended up becoming teachers themselves. You know, it is this whole network, one of the networks in LA that sort of runs behind all this cool stuff that happens. And as you get deep into the CalArts history, there are a lot of ideas, you know, like John Baldessari, you know, being the guy who in the 70s said, well, we don't even have to make paintings. We're just going to go outside and roll a tire down a hill and take pictures of it. And then that can be our art. And we're not even going to spend any time making anything. And Baldessari is one of those figures that, not necessarily a household name, but within the sphere, the sort of subculture of LA that Acetone grew out of, he's a major figure. Mike Kelly's a major figure. And, you know, like you say, there's so much information that sort of comes out of that, all the appropriation stuff. You know, it's CalArts is this single building on top of a hill north of LA in Valencia. And I think the culture of the art school has changed, but definitely from the 70s all the way through the 80s, it really was this weird, almost like a movie studio. It would be like producing all this stuff that sort of then flows into the greater picture of LA.
Yeah, it's interesting because it really, I mean, it's just like a time and a place and a group of people that are in that place at that time. And it kind of blows my mind when I look back, like I think you sent me that flyer from the Far-Fetched show, which is, could be considered the birth of Acetone, because that was a spin-out gig where our singer was kind of wandering around and we had to go on stage early, and we just got on and played instrumentally. But I just look at all the people that we were in there with at the time. I was like Mike Kelly, Jim Shaw, like all these same people that I'm, totally wrapped up with.
Raymond
to this
Pettibone.
Day. Yeah.
And a lot of these guys, they started out on your level, but certainly guys like Mike Kelly and Raymond Pettibone graduated to that elite level of, global art figures.
Yeah.
And so it's also funny just to think about, it's a chapter in LA. It's like a very specific chapter in LA's history that is actually really special because it's just distinctive to its time and to the characters involved, just like any other chapter in LA history. It just never really been highlighted. And I think that was one of the things that attracted me to the book too, that of course I was interested in the band and the music and the personalities, but I liked the way it also connected to like a very distinct time and place and set of characters and sort of set of subcultures within LA history, and that through starting with these three guys who played in a band, you could access that whole history of, the artists who came out of Cal Arts, and also like what we were talking about in the car, the changes in the music scene in LA in the 90s, and just all these little tributaries through LA culture. Even when you said the other day that the first amp you bought with the Acetone signing money had belonged to Billy Zoom from X, and he sold it on consignment in a store in Sherman Oaks, and then you had to take it to Billy Zoom's house in Los Feliz to get it looked at. I love stories like that.
It took him forever to fix it.
It took him forever, and he was the cantankerous guitarist then that you have since become, which is, so it's become full circle. But I love anecdotes like that.
I'm cantankerous?
Absolutely. It's
protest.
I think you waited 30 years to become the old man you were always
I'm
meant to be.
I'm way less cantankerous now than I used to be.
But
I'm a fucking Pollyanna now, Sam.
Yeah, that's probably true, actually.
It's funny. I rewatched Repo Man not too long ago, which is a movie that I totally love, and it really, really just captures that feeling of what LA was like when, like when we were starting out. Like it really, like that's the movie I can point to that really like I just watch it and I'm just like that's the LA of, that I knew then. And it's funny because then, in that movie, like the characters in the movie, these guys like Dick Rude and Xander Schloss that, that we knew, they were sort of our, they had this crappy band called the Two Free Stooges that were like rivals of Spin Out in the like scene. And it was, Xander was, he was a really good guitar player. He was played in Thelonious Monster and, so it's all like, there's just all these threads of entanglement there that are.
Yeah. I sometimes say that the 80s are my favorite time in LA history just because it's the point of greatest overlap between the old city and the new city. It's just this point where there was a window where like hair metal existed and also silent film stars were still alive.
Yeah, right.
And the first skyscrapers were going up, but there was still just completely rural settlements near downtown LA that had not changed since they were built. And so even though it's sort of the 80s are in general regarded as this like this low ebb in culture in general and sort of like a heinous time in LA history, it was this point of extreme coexistence between stuff. You know?
Right. Like you could still see Screamin' Jay Hawkins playing at a club. You know, he lived at the Argyle
Or Charles
Hotel,
Brown,
and you could see him playing in some weird, playing at like Raji's. He would play at
and then gangster rap
and
is
Corla
starting.
Pandit playing at the Moonlight Rollerway. I mean,
Did you see Corla Pandit at Moonlight Rollerway?
Rollerway?
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, no, he was like a regular.
Were you skating, or was he just he did the skate?
Yeah. No,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
was,
unbelievable.
Yeah, so it was amazing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things when you say Mark, there's this kid who came from LA or from Philadelphia to LA in 1985. It seems just like an extremely unremarkable year. You know what I mean? It's not like saying, I went out there in 67 or like 58 or 77. Right. But one of those LA in the 80s, it was one of those, it's kind of my favorite time. And that's one of those things where it is captured in a lot of movies, like B-rate movies from the 80s and 90s. It's a really well-documented period accidentally in film, and I do like watching like bad action movies from the late 80s and early 90s because they capture that sense of like a city that had all this ancient, decrepit stuff colliding with all this like new modern urban ideas. And so it was kind of an amazing time for this group of kids you knew to sort of enter the city and start doing their thing. And it was a weird void in the city's musical history too, because punk had sort of run its course, whatever grunge or whatever 90s music had not quite started, and it was like a really polyglot scene in Los Angeles at that time. I mean, we look at flyers from that period and you just have bands doing goth and rockabilly and hip hop, and I always think the bands that were most popular at that time really represent like how absurdly polyglot the scene was. Like Red Hot Chili Peppers were gonna do this punk funk thing, or Jane's Addiction, like whatever that kind of music is. So it's a really odd, undefined time in history. And again, like that's not really what Acetone's story is about, but I kind of like the idea that that's the stew from which acetone, like the essence of acetone emerges from that.
That there was no locus, there was no... except for hair metal. I mean, if that was
metal, right?
But otherwise, it was like there's no order to this reality. Like you do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, right. And no particular idea, or maybe many competing ideas as to what it meant to be an LA band. Not that anyone is necessarily thinking about that, but I always think of Acetone as this thing too, where you sort of slowly coming out of CalArts, this huge stew of information, influences, people doing art, bands trying to do 10 different things at once. Over the years, the two guys you played with, your trio, everything sort of slowly falls away. And then the thing that Acetone kind of finally becomes, I always think of that word distilled. It's like an interesting story of a band where it just felt like they kept shedding all the extraneous stuff to get towards this essence that was always there, but you just had to sort of keep molting these outer skins And even though Acetone was a band that had no real quantifiable success and never really registered in the outer world in any memorable way, to me, their great success was like they kept subtracting until like by the very end, it was just like the most distilled essence of what was between them the whole time. And to me, that's actually kind of a heroic story to tell about a band.
Wow, that was really... I really want to do that again. That was such a fun time.
It was super fun. We said bye and I was driving home. I texted my friend, my job is cool.
I feel like I do that all the time, and
I mean, you know, like...
We do have a cool job.
A lot of the time, it's sitting writing emails, and it's boring, and I am bored, but...
A lot of the times, it's riding around the hills of Highland Park with a rock star and a writer.
Yeah, we get to do cool, weird things.
And the next day, full disclosure, I went back to the Center for Self-Realization.
Really?
Yeah, and had a little walk around the garden, and it was beautiful and really peaceful.
Did you hike up from the street?
No.
You drove?
I drove.
I hiked up once. You can, like, park down on, what is it, York or something? Whatever that street is down where the train station is. You can park down there and walk up. And but it's not like you're walking through, like, paved residential streets, so I don't know why.
I took the quick trip.
Yeah, that's fine.
But, like we said before, the Acetone Anthology 1992 to 2001 and the companion book Hadley Lee Lightcap by Sam Sweet are both available to pre-order now at lightintheattic.net, and they will be in stores September 22nd on vinyl, on CD, and digitally. You can also stream the album on Spotify and on Apple Music.
Yeah. Cheers also to Huarache Azteca on York for their delicious agua fresca.
Oh my god, it was so perfect.
So necessary.
I had the melon.
Mm-hmm. I had the cactus. What's it called? Nopal?
Nopale?
Sure.
Or was it... Oh, is it not pepino? Cucumber one?
It was cactus.
Mm.
It was so good, and I just, like, downed it.
Yum.
Yeah, we needed sugar and hydration.
Thank you so much to Sam Sweet, to Mark Lightcap, Steve Hadley, and of course to our life-saving producer, Michelle Lanz.
And her dog, Dobby.
And her dog, Dobby, who is always the best.
Thank you for listening.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.